Chapter 256 Ice and Fire destroy the poisonous miasma. Wang Qiu naturally stayed with him. She followed him beside his all-terrain self-driving Ford and said, "Are you going to use this toy to barge through the miasma? That's entirely impossible. The toxic fog inside is too dense, and you can't even determine the right direction to go. Even if you can do so, you'll still need to breathe when you go inside. There won't be much for us to breathe in the depths of the miasma. So what are you going to do? When that happens, will you even be able to escape? Furthermore, I am confident that certain toxic miasmas are extremely corrosive, so metal will gradually become dysfunctional and could even melt. You think this thing of yours can fend off all the miasma? Stop dreaming." Huo Yuao made no reply as he continued working on his all-terrain self-driving fort. It was just as Wang Qiu had said. He was attempting to make the self-driving fort more airtight. Huo Yuao was very familiar with this Sol tool. The starlight sapphire rings in its space meant he could bring along a lot of materials, so he took less than an hour to complete the adjustments to make the all-terrain self-driving fort more airtight. Huo Yuao went inside to try it out, using spiritual detection to scan every single detail and component. He made sure that the internal regions were completely airtight before he came out, and began to work on something else on the outside. From Wang Qiu's perspective, Huo Yuao was incessantly stripping things off the self-driving fort before he added something else in their place in a manner that seemed overly complicated. Another 2 hours passed before he finished refining his all-terrain self-driving fort, and the sky was started to turn dark. He began to retrieve Sol tool after Sol tool from his starlight sapphire storage ring, and laid them all out neatly on the ground. He took out 16 milk bottles and some stationary Sol cannon shells. These shells were marked with various patterns and markings, 46 of them altogether. Huo Yuao picked out 9 shells that had red markings and put the other shells away before he took out another normal storage type ring and put it on his right hand's middle finger. He placed those 9 shells inside this ring. It was clear that he was sorting his inventory and his equipment. He checked his 16 milk bottles and discovered that some of them weren't stored to the brim with soul power, so he immediately began to infuse soul power into these half-full milk bottles, eventually completely filling every single one. Every single milk bottle would be imperative to the subsequent operation, and every single class 6 milk bottle could completely restore his soul power over a period of time. Wang Qiu looked on as Huo Yuao completed his task seriously, and her expression changed continuously. There was only one thought in her mind. She was still throwing around the statement that Huo Yuao had just said to her before this. "I've thought about losing her and what would become of me, and I realized that my entire world would turn grey, and I would no longer have any vitality. Perhaps I might even lose the will to live." That was when I realized to my surprise that her life has become more important than my own. She was so important in his heart, and he would risk his own life to break through this miasmic world for her. A person could actually give so much for another person. Why? How is that possible? She silently watched Huo Yuao finish everything he was doing as she immersed herself within these complicated emotions. The sky had already turned dark when he finished up with his milk bottles. Huo Yuao only made some time to rest at this moment. He raised his head and glanced at Wang Qiu before he heaved a faint sigh and said, "Why haven't you left?" Wang Qiu grunted coldly and replied, "Why should I leave? I want to see how a fool is going to kill himself." Huo Yuao smiled when he heard fool, as the images of Wang Dongge and himself on the sea god's lake surfaced in his mind. "I'm not a fool. I should be an idiot." Huo Yuao chuckled in reply. Wang Qiu was taken aback. "Is there something wrong with your brain?" Huo Yuao shook his head and said, "She was the one that said that. She told me before that I'm an idiot, and I'm her idiot. No matter what, this idiot has to be idiotic one more time. The sky is getting dark. You should leave at first light tomorrow. If you wish, you can wait for me outside the setting sun forest, and you can go back without me if I'm not out within 3 days. However, please don't tell anyone about what happened to me. Just let them believe that I've disappeared." Wang Qiu's emotions erupted once more, and she began to shout at Huo Yuao, "Idiot. You truly are an idiot, and there's nothing that can save you from your idiocy. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it?" Huo Yuao didn't mince words as he replied decisively, "Yes, it's worth it. I have to try, no matter how much danger and peril I have to put myself through, so that Dongge may continue to live. At the very least, I have to figure out the true mysteries contained within this place, and I will not give up even if there is but one sliver of hope. How can I look on with open eyes as Dongge passes into the void from her hidden wound? How can I look on as my entire world turns grey? I can't let that happen." Wang Qiu bit down on her lower lip. "Idiot, idiot. Idiot." Huo Yuao didn't bother with her any longer, and he collected some relatively dry branches from around him and began to make a campfire. Huo Yuao had no qualms about starting a fire here, as there weren't many soul beasts left in this area of the setting sun forest. He was quietly observing how the faint miasma in the air reacted to his campfire at the same time. Heated rations were still tastier than cold ones. Huo Yuao didn't dare to cook food from the things around him, as the plants and vegetation around him had been immersed in this miasma for an incredibly long time, and they probably contained toxins to some degree. He made some thick soup from the rations and food that he had brought along with him and began to eat. Wang Qiu's emotions had exploded for a moment, but she swiftly returned to normal. She came over to his side and began to eat as well. Night inside the setting sun forest was a lot colder than inside the great Stardow forest. There wasn't much wind, but the environment's eerie cold and humidity was still exceedingly uncomfortable. Fortunately, they had this campfire. The two of them sat around the campfire and sipped on their warm soup, and this helped them dispel the chill. Gulp. Huo Yuao finished the soup in his bowl and stretched out comfortably. He got to his feet and surveyed the area with spiritual detection to make sure there were no dangers or threats around them before sitting back on the ground. Wang Qiu sipped her soup in small mouthfuls. She was very serious in this endeavor, as if she was holding some precious treasure in her hands. "Qiu, at which time of day is this miasma the thickest? When is it the thinnest?" Wang Qiu answered coldly, "It's thickest in the morning, and it's thinnest at midday." Huo Yuao's eyes closed into a squint. Since that's the case, it's probably because the morning is a lot more humid than the rest of the day. The accumulated moisture throughout the night probably makes it easier for this miasma to travel. Sunlight is strongest at midday, and the moisture within all this miasma will partially evaporate under direct sunlight. It will thin without the help of voluminous water vapor. Is that correct? Wang Qiu nodded. "That's good." Then, Huo Yuao closed his eyes, and he seemed like he was starting to meditate beside the campfire. "Hey, what are you going on and on about?" Wang Qiu sounded a little upset. Huo Yuao opened his eyes once more. He heaved a faint sigh and said, "I'm serious, Qiu. You should leave at first light tomorrow." Wang Qiu grunted coldly and said, "What makes you think you can tell me what to do? Do you think you are the only one that is allowed to do idiotic things?" Huo Yuao shook his head. "But there's no need for that. It's too dangerous, and I'm not even 10% confident in succeeding. I'll have to rely on guesswork, trial, and error for many things. Stop beating around the bush. Say it. What's your plan, exactly? Since I have already followed you this far, do you think I can just look on while you venture into danger and peril all by yourself? Who do you think I am?" Wang Qiu's voice was ice cold, even though her tone was cold. Her words were warmer than even the campfire before him when they fell into his ears. Helping hands in one's direst moment were usually the most precious things one could ever have. "Thank you." Huo Yuao took a deep breath and said, "If you're willing to help, then I think our chances of success will be raised to 30%. If this toxic miasma is the only threat in this place, then I have an 80% chance of escaping with my life at least. The only thing I'm worried about right now is if there are other dangers besides this toxic miasma." Wang Qiu was astounded when she heard his words. "Are you being blindly optimistic? Why do you think you have an 80% chance of escaping with your life?" Huo Yuao answered, "Perhaps I'm not as familiar with forests inhabited by soul beasts or with miasma as you are, but my judgment and decision-making skills are still quite reliable. The person that imparted this map to me is a senior, and I am positive that he harbors no malicious intent. This is the reason why he added a seal on the map when he gave it to me, so that I would only come here to find the yearning heartbreaking brass to save Dongge's life when I was strong enough. I opened this seal by chance, and before I have obtained the necessary strength. However, the record suggests that not every area on the way to my destination is covered by this toxic miasma. Otherwise, I may not even have the confidence of retrieving what I'm looking for even if I were a titled Douluo. This miasma greatly hinders my spiritual detection, so how else could I find what I need to find? I trust that this task that this senior has given to me isn't that difficult to accomplish." Wang Qiu grunted and said, "These are but your conjectures." Huo Yuao chortled and replied, "We have to hypothesize boldly, but we have to prove it conscientiously and carefully. Furthermore, I have other safeguards. You've already said that this miasma is strongest during the early morning, and it will weaken at midday. That means there is no doubt that we should move forward at midday. Furthermore, since the warmth from sunlight impedes the miasma light impedes the miasma. Why don't we create something hot so that we can weaken the miasma around us? I've been observing it using spiritual detection ever since I started the campfire, and I realized that the miasma has no way of resisting fire, and clearly vanishes around this campfire. It's apparent that flames are fatal to this miasma. I don't have any fire-type abilities, but some of the soul tools that I carry around can create some fire, and are proving extremely effective. I've already attached these soul tools to the all-terrain self-propelling fort, and I've made the fort even more airtight than before, along with some other changes that will be imperative to keeping us alive. Also, my second martial soul possesses ultimate ice. Perhaps ice won't have the same effect on the miasma as fire does, but the miasma carries minuscule toxins that will be greatly weakened under exceedingly cold temperatures. Furthermore, my ultimate ice can affect the water vapor that makes up the fog. The miasma will also be weakened without water vapor to help it permeate. I've combined all this with the prepared safeguards to keep us alive. Even if we can't venture too deep inside, we will have no problem breaking out, since all we have to do is prevent the miasma from corroding our flying type soul tools. That being the case, we will have no problem escaping from here. The incredulity in Wang Qiu's eyes grew stronger and stronger as she listened to Huo Yua's analysis. She was truly astonished. She had just been daydreaming beside him during this short period of time, but he had already come up with so many solutions to deal with the problem. Everything he said made perfect sense. Rational judgment told her that not everywhere within this miasma was dangerous, and they also had ice and fire to handle the problem. The danger from Wang Qiu's point of view seemed to diminish. Huo Yua chortled as he stared at the astonished look on her face. Do you suddenly feel that I am smart and powerful? Wang Qiu snapped. Enough nonsense. Hurry up and rest. We'll get moving tomorrow. They began to meditate beside the campfire. The miasma was undeniably dangerous, but it also formed a protective dome around them. There were so few soul beasts in the area that they weren't threatened at all. The night passed without any other words. Huo Yua activated his flying type soul tool at first light and soared into the sky to monitor the surrounding miasma. Wang Qiu's words were accurate. The miasma in the morning was conspicuously denser, and he could see faint white fog around their location. However, the miasma around these parts was not that toxic, and dissipated or disintegrated when it came near the campfire. Huo Yua adjusted his altitude from time to time so that he could better monitor the situation, and he recorded everything that he saw. He didn't dare to be careless about anything that concerned his and Wang Qiu's safety, especially anything that would have an impact on whether he could retrieve the yearning heartbroken grass or not. The sun rose fully as he continued to observe and calculate. Huo Yua continuously communicated his observations to Wang Qiu, and they patiently waited for midday to arrive. Finally, it was almost time. Huo Yua and Wang Qiu ate some more, had their fill of water, and set off in their peak condition. Huo Yua's eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at the thinning miasma in the air. The weather was good today. The sun was radiant as it loomed over the earth, and there wasn't a single cloud to be seen. Truthfully, it wasn't what Huo Yua had wanted most. What he wanted most was heavy rain and a thunderstorm. The miasma would be weakened to a larger extent if heavy downpour came down upon the setting sun forest. Unfortunately, this was still the dry season, and storms were few and far between in the northern regions to begin with. The scorching sun completely dashed his hopes. We'll be setting off soon. Huo Yua turned towards Wang Qiu. Let's go. Wang Qiu's expression was equally cold and stoic, but there was a tinge of excitement beneath her eyes. This was the first time she had encountered a situation like this, where Huo Yua's intricate and comprehensive plan resolved the various dangers and threats. She was filled with curiosity and excitement against a natural phenomenon such as this, and the mystery of the unknown and uncertain dangers was extremely stimulating to her. Huo Yua extended the flying type soul tool behind his back, and reached out for Wang Qiu with his left hand. Their lives were at stake, and it was necessary to conserve as much soul power as they could with every step they took so that they could maintain themselves at their peak conditions. Their martial soul fusion would have a substantial part to play in this endeavor, and Huo Yua couldn't be bothered with anything lesser at a time like this. Wang Qiu glanced at him and umphed, but eventually slipped her left hand into his palm. Their hands clasped together, and their soul power naturally interacted, flourishing soul power undulations rippling out. Huo Yua looked up at the sky as he grabbed Wang Qiu's hand, and channeled soul power into her before they both soared into the sky. They surged out of the setting sun forest and continued to climb higher and higher. Their Class 6 flying type soul tools propelled them up, and they quickly reached several hundred meters in the sky. However, Huo Yua showed no signs of stopping as he continued flying upward with Wang Qiu. The miasma beneath them covered a tremendous area, which Huo Yua had roughly gauged beforehand. The strongest part of the miasma permeated to about 300 meters above ground, and these were the parts that had hints of color. The miasma here looked exceptionally beautiful, but was also exceedingly dangerous. They climbed to about 700 meters before Huo Yua stabilized his altitude. They were currently high enough to avoid the miasma's toxicity, and he took another glance at it before he pulled Wang Qiu along and flew towards the place where the miasma was the thickest. Never once did he consider using the all-terrain self-propelling fort to move forward on the ground toward their destination. The miasma on the ground would become increasingly thick, which meant that it would also become more corrosive. This would take a continuous toll on the fort's protective barrier and his soul power, whereas using their flying type soul tools expended a lot less. More importantly, his spiritual detection would be greatly impeded as they went deeper into the thick miasma. This meant that it would be impossible for him to determine direction and proceed toward his destination as fast as he could. It was different in the sky. Discerning direction in the air was convenient, and he was almost sure that the place where the miasma was the densest was likely where he had to go. The place where exotic things existed were undoubtedly unique, and this toxic miasma could be considered one of this place's unique features. Even if using flying type soul tools consumed more soul power than moving along the ground with his all-terrain self-propelling fort, Huo Yua would still choose the sky because it was a lot faster, and they could reach the skies above their destination in no time. Huo Yua's subsequent plan could be executed as fast as possible, and this meant he would be conserving soul power. The area they were coming from was in the toxic miasma's outer regions. They were flying as fast as they could through the sky, and it took but a few minutes before they reached the sky above the area where the miasma was most dense. Huo Yua held onto Wang Qiu with his right hand as he raised his left hand into the air. A beam of light sparkled from his ring, and a stationary soul cannon about 1.5 meters long appeared in his hands. He held the cannon stably on his shoulder, and let go of Wang Qiu's hand for a moment. He swung his wrist, and the storage ring on his left hand immediately produced 2 stationary soul cannon shells in his hands. These were the cannon shells with red markings that he had picked up the previous day. Huo Yua placed one shell into the barrel and held onto the other one as he activated spiritual detection. He was looking down from the sky, and the area he could cover was naturally greater than usual. While there was nothing obstructing his vision, Wang Qiu controlled her flying type soul tool and flew behind him while she tilted herself backward, so that she wouldn't affect his flying type soul tool's stability as she grabbed his shoulders with both hands at the same time. Their martial souls began to fuse, greatly boosting Huo Yua's soul power. Huo Yua didn't pause at all, swinging his right hand and tossing the cannon shell in it down. It fell away rapidly, while he quickly supported the stationary soul cannon with his right hand and locked onto the shell with his spiritual detection. Just as Tay cannon shell was about to pierce through the thick miasma, Huo Yua fired his soul cannon. Boom! The tremendous recoil pushed Huo Yua several meters through the air as a brilliant red beam erupted from his soul cannon. The cannon shell barreled forward at devastating speed, and went straight for the other cannon shell that Huo Yua had tossed out earlier. The shell fired by the stationary soul cannon naturally flew a lot faster than the one that was in freefall through the air. Huo Yua had used spiritual detection to lock onto his target, and his accuracy was comparable to ruler measurements. A red streak of light unerringly struck the cannon shell that had just plunged into the thick miasma. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions could be heard, and the thick miasma was immediately tainted fiery red. The entire miasmic cloud began to tremble violently and tumultuously as sparks flew in all directions. The stationary cannon shell that Huo Yua had used was a Class 5 explosive incendiary bomb. It wasn't as powerful as the giant lightning cannon that he had used before, but it had an extremely large area of effect. The explosion would also generate a terrifying amount of intensity, whose waves would permeate in all directions. A single Class 5 explosive incendiary bomb could cover a radius of at least 100 meters, and was exceptionally violent. Huo Yuao opted to use 2 shells, and made it so that these 2 shells would collide and detonate in the air for an even more explosive impact, which would cause even more damage to the miasmic cloud. On the other hand, detonating the cannon shell in the ground might damage the herb that he was supposed to retrieve. He wanted to obliterate the miasma, not this magical herb. His calculations could be said to be impeccable and precise, and he executed his plan as perfectly as could be. Huo Yuao didn't conserve his stationary soul cannon shells, and fired another 2 more, one after another without hesitation. More frightening explosions rippled through the air. The first explosion had already cleared away a large amount of the toxic clouds, and the second explosion detonated at a position slightly below the first one. Their vision immediately became clearer when the second explosion went off. Let's go. Huo Yuao swiftly stored his stationary soul cannon before reaching back with his right hand and grabbing Wang Qiu's arm, and they plunged towards the ground. The stationary soul cannon had opened a path, but it couldn't be maintained for too long. Once the high temperature dissipated, the thick miasma in the surroundings would immediately start to condense once more. 4 Class 5 stationary soul cannon shells had opened this path, and Huo Yuao couldn't waste such a great opportunity. Their bodies plummeted rapidly, and they quickly dove toward the thick miasma. Huo Yuao and Wang Qiu could clearly see that the surrounding miasma was starting to close up at an alarming speed. The miasma was just too thick and dense, to the point where it seemed to materialize in the sky as it collapsed in on the hole. The vegetation beneath them was conspicuously different from the plants in the setting sun forest's outer regions. Many of these plants were dotted with colors, but this spectacle didn't represent anything good at all. Colorful plants often meant acute venom. This was common knowledge they had learned at Shrek Academy. Huo Yuao was extremely calm at this moment. He pushed his spiritual detection to its largest possible range and meticulously monitored everything that was happening around him. It was clear that there was no way out once he and Wang Qiu submerged themselves in the toxic cloud, and they could only move forward. They only had this one chance. If they backed out, they would no longer have the ability to delve into this mysterious miasmic world a second time. They barreled through several hundred meters in the blink of an eye. They were just about to hit the ground when Wang Qiu went ahead and punched downward. Golden light erupted amidst a deep dragon roar as fearsome strength compressed the air around them until it began to crackle shrilly. Wang Qiu created a deep crater in the ground as explosions continued to ring out, and the colorful plants on the ground, and the liquids within them, were sent flying in all directions. They landed stably on the ground, and Huo Yuao activated his Class 6 protective soul barrier immediately, enveloping them both, and swiftly began to survey his surroundings. The world around them was so colorful that everything felt like rainbows. The multicolored plants on the ground covered every single piece of ground, and not a single inch of soil could be seen. There were hardly any trees or woods in this area, which was probably because of the corrosive power of the plant's toxins. Wang Qiu was a little surprised as she observed, strange. The miasma on the ground isn't as dense as it is in the sky. This was true. They were in the miasma's core regions, and the miasmic clouds here were tinged with the colors of the rainbow. However, it was only present as a faint mist here, and even though it hindered their vision to a certain extent, it wasn't enough to block their line of sight completely. The miasma was undoubtedly a lot thinner than the thick and toxic clouds in the sky above them. Huo Yuao explained, clouds and mist always permeate and drift away upward. I already noticed this, as even though the miasma is dense in these parts, it's obvious that it's drifting upward, so the miasma on the ground probably isn't as toxic as it is above us. However, these multicolored miasmic clouds are still extremely dangerous. I can already feel the miasma corroding my protective barrier, even though it's energy-based. Huo Yuao had already determined the right direction when they were in the sky. He pulled Wang Qiu and immediately proceeded towards their destination. They were very careful as they pushed forward. Cold energy condensed beneath Huo Yuao's feet, and a layer of frost appeared on the ground with every step that he took so that he could block off the plants they were walking on. The soul protective barrier could clear away the plants in front of them, but it couldn't do anything against the plants beneath their feet. So Huo Yuao had to resort to this clumsy method. There was no doubt that this consumed soul power, but it was safer than otherwise. He was not about to let himself come into contact with any of these venomous plants, or the multicolored miasma, as he had no idea how toxic these things could be. It would be almost impossible to retreat if something happened to him right here, or if a hole opened in his protective barrier. They began to see some things that made their skin crawl as they pushed forward. Enormous bones and skeletons would appear on the ground from time to time, and those bones were also as multicolored the miasma around them. Clearly, these weren't plants, but the remains of soul beasts that had perished from the poison. Crack. A sound could be heard from not too far away, which startled them both. They concentrated their soul power at almost the same time as they gazed in the direction the sound came from. A large skeleton began to lean sideways. The bones beneath it had clearly become fragile and brittle from the corrosion, and the skeleton crashed to the ground with a loud boom in the next moment, exploding into a million broken pieces. The brilliant colors above them became even denser than before. Huo Yuao and Wang Qiu both drew cold breaths as they looked on. They could see that the venom was so toxic that it could corrode bones, to the point where these bones became fragile and eventually disintegrated. It was not hard to imagine the number of soul beasts that were buried underneath these multicolored plants. A soul beast's skeleton was the toughest part of its body, and somewhat even used by humans as special materials. One of the items that best represented this was undoubtedly the golden dragon spear in Wang Qiu's hands. It felt as if everything in this miasmic world was being corroded. This toxic cloud was just too overwhelmingly poisonous. Wang Qiu muttered, these remains have become nutrients for the toxic miasma. The miasma continuously murders other living beings, and even the birds flying through the skies above have become victims. This cycle has made the miasma stronger and stronger. Perhaps, after millennia, the entire setting sun forest will become a toxic and miasmic forest. That's just too horrifying. Huo Yuao's eyebrows were tightly knit together as he began to pick up the pace. He had realized that the colors outside his soul protective barrier were becoming denser as the multicolored miasma began to stick to his barrier. He could withdraw his protective barrier to shake off the toxic miasma, but that would mean he and Wang Qiu would be exposed to it. The toxic miasma was exceedingly corrosive, and Huo Yuao could clearly feel that his soul power was being consumed at an alarming speed. This was definitely not something that he wanted to see, so he had no choice but to push forward more quickly than before. When they reached the point where both he and Wang Qiu couldn't take it anymore, he would use an explosive incendiary bomb to open a path like before, and they would then use their flying type soul tools to escape from this toxic world. It was the only way to stay alive. The world around them was full of brilliant colors as they continued forward. The map wasn't useful anymore at this point. Huo Yuao could still use the map to roughly determine their location before they came in, but he could only rely on luck and continual spiritual detection to find his destination once they were inside. Huo Yuao would activate spiritual detection to sweep in a single direction every few minutes. This method was a little clumsy, but it was still effective. In addition to his exemplary memory, it made sure they were not walking around in circles. An hour quickly passed. Huo Yuao had already expended his first milk bottle. However, Wang Qiu was the one that actually used the milk bottle, as he had to focus his energy on his spiritual detection. Their soul power was connected, so replenishing Wang Qiu's soul power meant Huo Yuao was also replenishing his own. Huo Yuao began to narrow down his destination after the hour of exploration. However, the miasmic clouds outside were starting to put more and more pressure on him, to the point where the multicolored miasma completely blocked off his vision outside the protective barrier. He also had to strengthen his protective barrier continuously to maintain its integrity. Wait, Huo Yuao whispered as he immediately pulled on Wang Qiu. She was already in his embrace before she could even react. Wang Qiu was still carefully perceiving everything around her, and this sudden change startled her. A dense masculine aura smacked her in the face, and she even felt a little dizzy, as if she had been struck by the toxic miasma outside. An incredibly cold aura emanated from Huo Yuao's body in the next moment, and this aura crossed over Wang Qiu's body and permeated outside. I've done it. Huo Yuao's delighted voice could be heard, and Wang Qiu was shocked awake as Huo Yuao released her from his embrace at the same time. Wang Qiu turned to look, and saw that the multicolored radiance had been replaced by icy blue colors in a 5-meter radius around them. The luminous rainbow-colored particles had been blown into the air, and the dense miasmic particles that were originally plastered on the soul protective barrier vanished at the same time. This is The domain of perpetual ice. Huo Yuao had used his domain of perpetual ice to freeze the water vapor within the toxic miasma, and he controlled these frozen particles to push outward so that his barrier was a little cleaner. This method was a little dubious, and it felt as if he was drinking poison to quench his thirst. In the end, the domain of perpetual ice consumed a lot of soul power, and Huo Yuao wouldn't have decided on this method if not for the fact that his protective barrier was reaching the end of its life. Huo Yuao withdrew his barrier at this moment and released it against immediately afterwards. His soul power consumption was instantly restored to the optimal level. Huo Yuao also took this opportunity to take a breather. Wang Qiu forcibly suppressed her palpitating heartbeat as she suggested calmly, "Why don't you use your third eye to probe around? We may consume a lot more soul power if we continue going around in circles." She didn't need Huo Yuao's explanation to understand that the embrace happened because he didn't want her to get hurt because of his soul skill. Bringing their bodies into close contact meant that Huo Yuao could use their martial soul fusion to unleash his soul skill beyond her body, and it was clearly the best choice at the moment. But this guy still had to me in the end. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.